where justice meets actions because at the Mississippi Center for Justice, we believe access to clear, accurate information is essential, especially when laws and policies impact participation in our democracy. Today's focus, access to the ballot, what the SHIELD Act means for Mississippians. Recently signed into law, the SHIELD Act introduces new requirements that affect voter registration and voter. I'm so sorry, and voter rolls, raising important questions about access and eligibility. Our goal today is to break this down in a way that is clear, informative, and grounded in what voters need to know. Joining us today, Harriet Tarikan, Director of Advocacy and Policy at MCJ, and Jacqueline Thompson, Washington County Election Commissioner. Together, they'll walk through what this law does, who it impacts, and what communities should know. Thank you again for being here. Harriet, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Elijah, and good morning, everybody. Commissioner Thompson, Jackie, thank you so much for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you. I think it's, very rare for people to get to talk to election commissioners, get to talk to the people that are um, responsible for making sure our elections run smoothly, and help us vote and get to the ballot. So I will just turn it over to you first to kind of set the tone. How long have you been an election commissioner? What are what are things that you've seen? And what if what is your first impression, I guess, of the SHIELD Act?
First of all, I've been an election commissioner since 2016 here in Washington County. And 2022, I was voted on to the board for the state of Mississippi for elections, election commissioners. So I sit for the second congressional district. And what we do is try to improve the process of elections to make it easy.
I think for everybody on the call, really quickly, the SHIELD Act is set to take an effect July 1st.
Yes,
It was Senate Bill 2588, and it was passed to require documentary proof of citizenship when voting in Mississippi. The SAVE Act that has been in the news a lot is the federal version of that, and it is looking like it's not going to pass, but Mississippi has passed the SHIELD Act, which will require documentary proof of citizenship for Mississippians. And so, as Miss Jackie said, this means that now individuals who are newly registering, their name will go through two checks, the Department of Public Safety and then the SAVE Act, which is a federal database. If that pings the individual as potentially a non-citizen, that person would then have to provide documentary proof of citizenship, which would be a birth certificate or a passport to show that they are eligible to vote. I think Miss Jackie, you hit on this already, but we already have a lot of procedures in place to ensure that everybody who is registering to vote and voting is a citizen. During the conversations at the legislature and afterwards, there has been no evidence that non-citizens have registered to vote or are voting in the state of Mississippi. And so, in fact, the law that has been passed is now um, creating additional burdens on eligible voters, right?
yes.
Um, and so the SHIELD Act, when it takes effect, if you are newly registering to vote, and so it is your first time registering, will impact you, but also for the election commissioners and the clerks and everybody who manages elections, you all will have a list maintenance requirement to run names through the system every year, right? And
That's
so,
correct.
and Ms. Jack, you already touched on all of the other policies and procedures that have taken effect in the past few years that have made your jobs more cumbersome. Um, can you talk a little bit about how hard it will be, or how much more work it will be for you all to now have this new change of address? You have this Experian data, and now you also have this list management requirement under the SHIELD Act. I also want to say before I turn back to you, Miss Jackie, I am seeing the questions coming in into the chat. I will be addressing them as we go and synthesizing them. So, I just want to let people know that we will address your questions in the chat. But Miss Jackie, can you talk a little bit about what you all will face as election commissioners in terms of list maintenance using the SHIELD Act?
Well, not a lot of the list maintenance will be put on us. It's actually with the registrar's office, which is a circuit clerk, because that's what she does. That's her primary thing in election is to register voters. And so, what we have to do as election commissioner, once someone comes in and they may have been pinged as illegal, we have to send them a letter. And that letter is, from what I have read and was told by one of the senators, is we would send them a letter and say, hey, I'm paraphrasing it, pretty much, hey, your name went through the Shield Act and we found out that you do not have the correct information. So you would have to prove that you are a citizen pretty much. And you have 30 days to get this information in. So if it's doing, like, for instance, we got this election coming up in November, um, you have 30 days. If you are 90 years old and you lost your birth certificate, now you have to go find your birth certificate to prove that, or come up with a passport, something to prove that you are a U.S. citizen at this point. And so, if you don't do it in 30 days, they cannot remove you from the role. But you go to vote, you have to vote by affidavit.
Right. And if you vote by affidavit, you have 5 days to cure, right?
That's
So
right.
if you vote by affidavit ballot, you have 5 days to come back to show one of these pieces of documentary
Evidence.
of
Yes.
citizenship. And I see a lot of questions coming in. Um, we do believe that a passport card will work, but a lot of the points that are coming in the chats lead to this greater question of all of these documents are actually hard to get, cost a lot of money, and people really don't know, right? So, a lot of people don't know where their birth certificate is. We live in a state where there are a lot of at-home births. People may have never had an official copy of their birth certificate, have to go back to the county they were born in to get a certificate, or come to Jackson if you need one quickly, right? If you need a birth certificate quickly, like if you're trying to cure that, you would have to come to Jackson to get that. And then passports are expensive, $165. You have to
Right.
have a lot of money. You have to have your birth certificate to get your passport. Um, and it just creates a large burden. Right now, MCJ and a lot of our partners, on behalf of several organizations, have sent in a notice letter saying that we believe the SHIELD Act violates the National Voter Registration Act, which is a federal law that was passed in 1993 that says that um, registering to vote in states has to comply with the federal system to register to vote. And the Supreme Court has ruled that federally requiring documentary proof of citizenship is actually counter to the Voter Registration Act. Um, but we have seen these state bills pop up in a lot of states. New Hampshire passed one, Florida passed one, Texas. And it's interesting because in New Hampshire, we saw actually a lot of people encountering this problem and pinging on the SAVE Act. A lot of people in the comments have mentioned, women who change their name due to marriage or divorce will be impacted by this or could be impacted by this. Newly naturalized citizens. The important thing to know about the SAVE database, the federal database that people's names are going to be checked after, is that it's a snapshot of information. And if that information hasn't been updated, then your dated information is what hits. And states don't have the ability to update that information. Only the federal government can update that information. And so it can cause a lot of problems for you, Jackie, on election day, and dealing with a lot of people already that, have, um, sorry, a lot of people already that, vote affidavit, have questions, have concerns, are submitting affidavit ballots for a whole bunch of other reasons. How And I guess you said nobody talked to you all before they passed the SHIELD Act, but have you all had conversations about how this will impact running the election on election day for you all when so many people could potentially be putting in affidavit ballots instead of voting regularly?
We are like presently now, we do have a training that's coming up in June. And that training, they're going to talk about the SHIELD Act and how it would affect mass majority, especially in rural Mississippi. We have Washington County election commissioners. We have called a meeting for our senator and the House of Representative Bailey and John Hines to meet with us. Because if this is going to take place, I think you all should be a part of this and try to help the community of Washington County as much as possible. And so we do have that set up to try to defray the craziness that's going to take place. Election day, we don't know what it's going to look like, but if everybody comes in and they had to go through this system, that our information from the state of Mississippi has already been sent to what you would call the SAVE Act, SHIELD Act. Our information has already, our Secretary of State have already sent Mississippi's information, voter roll information away. So we may be the first, I'm gonna say, guinea pigs of this thing. And when we normally would have an affidavit somewhere, my whole district, which is District 1, I would probably have somewhere about 30 affidavits out of District 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 1. But it's a possibility we could have hundreds. We could have hundreds. We just don't know at this point because we don't know what this animal looks like. We hearing all of the things that could possibly take place, but we're not sure if it actually will affect Washington County as much as it would Jackson, Mississippi, the larger areas. But we're trying to come up with a plan that would help the citizens of Washington County to make sure that it's a smooth transition from what they're trying to present and what we have to present to the public.
And so we have a question in the chat that asks that, so if you do not have a driver's license, is it presumed that you are a non-citizen? Is there basically a rebuttable presumption that if you don't have a driver's license, then you are not a citizen?
No, but you will be flagged in the system according to what I have read from it. That is a reason why they would flag you. And you would have to present that information, whatever it is that they need in order for you to prove that you are a citizen.
Right. And so do you all know, and I guess one of the concerns here is that people don't know annually when these checks are going to happen. And so if you've been registered to vote, or if you're registered to vote and you show up this November and they haven't done that check yet, and so it's only impacting people who are newly registering to vote between July 1st and November. And then you go to your next election and apparently the check has been done and all of a sudden you have been flagged. You won't find out until election day, ostensibly, right? Or will there be some sort of mechanism with which you will, or the Secretary of State or the clerks are alerting individuals that they have been flagged?
This is my understanding of it, that once they get the list of people, they will send us that list on the SIM system. And once we get that list, then we have to take steps in making sure we notify the people and that we assist them in any kind of way that they need the help in order for them to prove that they are citizens of the United States of America.
So that's another large burden on you all, because then you will have the burden of mailing those notices to everybody who has been flagged by that system. You've already had to notify everybody that has been hit from the Experian data,
Yes.
right? And then also all of the change of address individuals. And so what does that look like for you as an election commissioner to have to manage three different lists of three different flags on individuals that should be able to vote.
It's going to be a lot of work. I can say that. um, and the part that makes me nervous is because the Postal Service is not at its best right now. And they are removing so many postal workers that they're not doing a really good job in making sure people get their mail in a timely fashion. And so we we're gonna have to do something different. And what I mean about that is, you can mail something in Greenville, and then it has to go to Jackson, then come back to Greenville, and then they put the mail out. So we're having these like stall, or perhaps stuff that is being returned to us that has never been mailed to these people. I'm dealing with cards that were returned from the COAs that we sent out last year. They're just coming back in our post office box, where they're being stamped saying just got here, April 1 or April 15th and March 1st, March 13th. It's crazy that we sent this stuff out last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just getting some responses back from the post office with their stamp and seal on it. And so what helps a lot is if somebody comes in and challenge, we can show, hey, we only got this on this date. That's the thing that makes me nervous, because the mail-in system is not at its best. And people getting notified through mail is going to be chaotic, because they may not find out that they are on the watch list, or have to go back to DMV to prove their citizenship, or whatever the case may be, until election day. They show up at the poll.
Right. And it's my understanding that all of this mail that is being sent out, right, is currently paid for by tax dollars.
That's correct.
And so we are actually paying for all of these systems that it doesn't sound like are making our elections stronger. If in fact they're making it sounds like they are disenfranchising voters, people who have lived at the same address for 30 years, but because they scanned all of the Jacqueline Thompsons, that one might have hit for a different address, and now all of a sudden you have to go through this. And counties are spending a ton of money not only trying to do the change of address ones, the Experian data ones, and now we'll also have to do ones for the SHIELD Act. And the SHIELD Act is every year that
That's right.
you all will have to do. So let's talk a little bit about Experian data. I know that Washington County was in the first Mississippi Today article, and they interviewed you on how you're interacting with Experian data. Can you just give everyone on the call kind of an overview, you already did, of what that data was, but how you all in Washington County dealt with using the Experian data?
Well, we always had a plan for that anyway, not just that, but the national change of address. We would actually call the people. If you have information in the system, or somebody knew somebody or something like that, we would actually call to find out whether or not, did you receive any mail, or have you moved? And generally they say, no, I haven't. And if they're still here, we would ask them to come by the office, because we knew if we mailed it again, what was going to happen. Most of those people who were on that list, they hadn't voted. Some hadn't voted since 2012. But those that voted 2020, 2022, 24, even in 25, we were not making these people inactive, because we were saying they were 65 years and older. So, of course, you can't, for jury summons or whatever, or change of address, you have to make that extra step to make sure you are not causing these people to be on the purge list, or you're causing these people to be removed and made inactive. So we did some extra steps in making sure we call, or contact a relative, had the relative to have them to give us a call. We tried to make extra steps. But when we really found this out in February, when we went to training, we slowed the pace down a lot more and said, hey, we've got to make every effort to contact the voter.
Hmm. And Miss Jackie, like you said earlier in your comments, there are 82 counties that run their elections in 82 different ways. We don't know if every county is taking that extra step to call the voters. How much training or support are you all getting from the Secretary of State on how to, like you said, sometimes we'll call the relative and ask them to call us. That seems like a very important step, but one that other counties might not be taking. Um, what direction, if any, do you have from Secretary of State, and how much training and support do you all get in trying to figure out all of these new requirements?
We get a lot of support from the Secretary of State. We do, especially Madeline. We can call her at any time, and or email her, and she'll respond. Um, we do have a lot of support from that area, but as far as you have to come up with your own plans on how to save your voters. And they give you the information and they expect you to learn the information. But there are a lot of counties. There are a lot of counties. Um, they don't ever do the COAs. The circuit clerks are doing them. They don't do their own work. They may have a contractor or somebody that comes in and do it. And so they don't actually have interaction with the community like we do. Um, a lot of them don't know this information, like the Shield Act that's coming forward. I have a county, neighboring county, it's Issaquah County. They don't have a clue what they're going to do or what's going to take place. They're expecting their circuit clerk to do that work, or they're expecting whoever they contracted to do that work, not them. And one of the things we wanted to do, and I asked the Secretary of State, could we do this? Was go from one district to the other district and explain to the people what's about to take place with this. The change of addresses, take some slips and let them, if you've moved and since the last election, if you fill this information out, we can go back and change your address and put it in the system. We try to go into those communities like we did when we got the new machines. We wanted to introduce this stuff to the community first. And so we're trying everything. I mean, when I say everything, any witty invention and idea that God download, I'm going to use it. And so we try to do everything to get the people involved in elections.
And how did the Secretary of State respond to that request to go district to district and do that kind of cross-district training?
They said you all can do it, but the only thing about the list maintenance that we used to get paid for to go public demonstration, we don't get paid for it, but you can go do it on your time. So we just do it on our time to introduce this stuff.
Yeah. And Miss Jackie, you said something so important. You said we have to do a lot to save our voters. And so
Yes.
the SHIELD Act and all of these measures have been touted as ways to protect our elections, right? We are protecting our elections from voter fraud. We're protecting our elections from people who moved out of state and are still voting. We're protecting our election from immigrants who are voting in our elections unfairly. But there have been so many analyses and so many reviews done over the years, and there's almost no voter fraud in the country. I think the latest one was in Ohio, and they found one instance of a person who had registered to vote but likely did not vote. Um, and so when you say we're doing all this work to save our voters, can you just say a little bit more about this? It sounds like you don't believe that this is making our elections stronger.
It's not.
It's actually doing the opposite.
It is to
Yeah.
me. I think it's a way to disenfranchise voters. That's my opinion, and I'm gonna stand on it. Um, they're not making it easier for people to come out and vote. We have 1.7 million people that are in the state of Mississippi, And out of 1.7 million voters that's in the state of Mississippi, you've had only 13 incidents that may have happened in the past 5 years that didn't even go anywhere. It didn't. No one has ever voted that was a non-citizen. No one uh, potentially came to register to vote. Did not know they could not vote. And so when they got there, they were told they couldn't because you're a non-citizen. No other problems. And so I think the most part of it is um, this is just a way to stop people from voting. And I hate to say this, but in most communities where there's a high concentration of African American, we get frustrated if we are turned around, if we have an issue with something dealing with voting, or if it looks like it's a blockade or something that's there. We get very, very upset and we will not vote. We will not come out. We will not fight for that anymore. And I've been seeing a lot in Washington County. The voting numbers have literally dwindled down to nothing. We had an election in November, countywide election, and out of that countywide election we had, it was only 2,700 people that came out and voted.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, to your point, right? Mississippi is already a very hard state to vote in. We have one day to vote. Unless you have an excuse, we don't have early voting. Absentee voting is very difficult. If you are truly out of state, you have to request an application for your ballot, get that notarized, and then get your ballot, and then get that notarized and send it back in. And so, um, to your point, right? And then you know, we hear about voter intimidation. Um, just voting in Mississippi is difficult to begin with. So on top of all that, you actually make it to election day, you go in to vote, and then you're told actually now you have to vote on an affidavit ballot, and then you have to come back within the next 5 days to prove that you're a citizen. Is just going to further disenfranchise voters, and unfortunately, it will always have a disproportionate impact on Black and low-income Mississippians. Um, I see more questions coming in the chat. Mo is asking about passport books and carrying proof of citizenship. So the SHIELD Act doesn't touch on the documents that you need to have day to day, right? There are other laws that cover what documents naturalized citizens, individuals on a visa, et cetera, have to have on them. So the SHIELD Act doesn't impact that. The SHIELD Act impacts simply the documents that you need to have to register to vote and the documents that you need to show in order to register to vote. And then people are asking if you can still check your voter registration on vote411.org or Y'all Vote. Yes, you can. You can still check your registration. It is a good idea to constantly check your registration. I think the concern that we all have is that people who've been registered to vote for years, who have been voting, who don't necessarily have a need to check their voter registration because they've been registered to vote since they could vote, might still get flagged by the SHIELD Act during one of these annual list maintenances and will not know that they are not registered or that there is a flag on them until they go in to vote, and then we'll have to deal with this system where they will vote by affidavit ballot and then have to bring proof of citizenship. If folks on this Zoom want to help address this problem, Miss Jackie, what do you recommend? How do you recommend people can speak up or act or try and address this problem?
Go talk to your senators, people that represent you, people that you trust, that you put in office that would make the decision for you. We've got to speak. We've got to talk to the people, educate our people in our communities. We've got to go door to door like we used to campaign, door to door, and say, hey, are you aware of this? And it's going to take a little work. And we've gotten to the point that we don't want to work anymore. And so these are some of the things that we have to focus on. is making sure that our people are educated on what's happening, what's going to take place, and be proactive. And
Yeah,
that's all I
absolutely.
can say.
But it's a good point. We often talk about legislation being passed, but just like legislation passed, we can call our electeds and get legislation repealed. Um, we can be more engaged. We can ask for a different decision next year. But also, like I said at the top of the call, MCJ and our partners have sent a notice letter saying that we believe this violates the National Voter Registration Act. We will likely bring suit once it takes effect. But something that everybody on this call can do is try to help people get that documentation. There are going to be a lot of people that don't know where their birth certificates are, that need help figuring out how to get a birth certificate, where to go to get a birth certificate. Um, that process is easier if you are not up against a deadline. So if you know individuals that don't have birth certificates, or if you can reach out to family members and say, hey, just make sure you can locate your birth certificate. Uh, you can do that now. You can request it from your county, but it takes several days to come. But you are not going to be in that rush if you just have those 5 days to cure an affidavit ballot. Additionally, a lot of our community members will need help paying for these documents, paying for passports, getting passports. Um, so, I think one is education. People don't know that this has taken into effect or that it has um, will impact them. A lot of people believe that because they were born in this country, it might not affect them, but that's not true. Like we talked about, there are women who are married and went through a name change, members of our trans community that have gone through name changes, divorced women, students, out-of-state students that are coming into the state that don't have a Mississippi state driver's license and want to register to vote when they are studying here could be impacted. And of course, our immigrant communities that have been naturalized, but the SAVE Act might not have been updated since their naturalization. So there are a lot of groups, thousands of Mississippians that can be impacted by this, all to solve a problem that Miss Jackie very eloquently told us that is zero. And even the 13 that you could say tried to register to vote never even ended up voting. And someone put in the comments, right, that adopted children will also um, face this issue. Um, and so I want to circle back again to just what you talked about generally in managing our elections, being an election commissioner. You talked about work that you do that you are not paid for. So a lot of times in elections, you all are the face, right? Something goes wrong on election day, you're calling your election commissioner, you're upset about something, but you all have to do a lot of this work year round with, you know, out payment sometimes, with low pay. How, especially sitting on the state board of election commissioners, how are election commissioners reacting to this, responding to this? What do you all want community to know about what you all are doing and how you are trying to save your voters?
I think a lot of people in the community or in the state of Mississippi does not realize how much work we actually put in. Actually, the process and how we get paid $110 every 5 hours. So we could only work 5 hours a day and make $110. So imagine on election day, we make now they just gave us a raise, which is $200 for election day. We get up and on the beat at 6 in the morning. And sometimes we don't leave until 12 midnight, 1, 2, depends on how large the election is. So you come back the next day and you have all these other duties and it's way over 5 hours. So a lot of times people don't know the work that we put in to make sure they get the right numbers, to get numbers on time, to make sure the election is certified in the right amount of time. Um, it's a lot of work that we put into it, but you gotta love this. I love this process. I love working with uh, voting. anything dealing with voting, you could say, let's go over here and let's vote who's going to be the queen this year. When I hear vote, I just get really excited. My dad started us out early when we were young, and he said that's the only time you get a chance to tell somebody how you feel about them, and you don't have to say a word. He used to say all the time to us, if you don't vote, you voted. So whatever you get out of that process, that's who you voted for. And so a lot of times we're doing the work because we love it, we enjoy it. We want people to know and understand that, we're we're fighting to keep your vote. There are people who are trying to make sure you don't vote. And so we go through every process to make sure that this voter stays on the roll.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for the work that you do. It's so important because although there can be legal groups working on litigation from the top or our legislators doing things from the top, you all are the ones working on it day to day and figuring out how to help voters on election day make sure that their vote counts. Um, I know we're at 10:45, and so I want to turn to some more questions from the audience, but I do want to highlight some things that we talked about. So I think one important thing to know is that we should all be checking our registration status. And we should all be helping people in our community check our voter registration status. Mississippi Votes, and Elijah, to put you on the spot, if you can drop their hotline number in the chat, has a year-round hotline where they can help you check your voter registration status, but you can also go to vote411.org, y'allvote.com, go. Y'all vote, we'll put it in the chat. And continue to check your voter registration status and help people check their voter registration status. I also want to touch on something about the chaos that this has created and the fear that this has created. And I think we all agree that it is by design. This really is to sow fear in our immigrant communities and communities across our state and our country. But those of us on this call, those of us who want to stand in solidarity, all know that we can help people figure out how to get their passports, how to get their proper documentation, and then stand with our immigrant communities. Additionally, for those of you that are worried about your voter registration, again, call the hotline, go to your clerk's office. You can confirm that. But the important thing, if the SHIELD Act is to stand, is that you check your voter registration status every year to make sure that when they are doing the list maintenance, you are not flagged. That they have to do the list maintenance under this act. And so that will happen yearly. And so it is possible that you are not pinged by this election, but that doesn't mean that that will be true in a year from now. I want to see if folks have any other questions, and I might have missed some in the chat. So if I've missed your question, if you could just put it back in the chat for me, that would be helpful. Or Tara or Elijah, if you all see questions that I have not answered and could highlight them for me, that would also be helpful.
I think maybe you just answered this, but I'll ask it again just because of how it's asked here. What is the current requirement regarding address for voting, and how can a voter be sure their information is accurate in advance of an election?
Contact your circuit clerk's office.
Especially if you have moved recently, definitely contact your circuit clerk's office. If you are wondering if you are impacted by the Experian data, again, contact your circuit clerk's office, but check your registration. You can call your circuit clerk. You can use that hotline. If you get a card in the mail that says anything about voting, read it carefully, right? Election commissioners are sending out confirmation cards to individuals that have been pinged, and so you might find a card in your mail asking you to confirm your address. But check your mail, call your circuit clerk, check the websites. Those are all going to be important steps, and make sure that your community is doing it. We are all plugged in, we're all on this call, but that's not true for a lot of our community members. So just make sure you check that you're registered and check someone else's registration too.
Is there a additional documents, like say on voting day? I know this probably should be done before voting day, election day, but additional documents, if say a married lady, her driver's license does not match what her current name is on the birth certificate, does she need to take the marriage certificate or something like that? Are there additional documents that you would recommend folks gather and have just in case they have to provide this proof?
Uh, I would say to save yourself some trouble, because you wouldn't know if that person was on that list or they were asking for regular documentation of that, because you actually have to take it to the DMV. That's where you would have to take it to verify all of that. And so I would say check your voting status or anything else that you need to check registration the Friday before the election day. Because once that voter roll is printed on that Saturday or that Sunday, after the last affidavit can be done, um, you will not be on the active voter roll. You will be on the inactive voter roll. So I tell people, if you're going to check your voting status, do it at least a week in advance, at least by Friday before that election. Because once the circuit clerk, once we print the voter roll, you're not going to show up on that roll as an active voter.
Mhm. And just as a reminder, if you are an active voter, you only need ID to vote, and the ID is just for a name check, and so it can be expired for the last 10 years. The address doesn't have to match. That ID that you need to vote on election day, if you are on the active roll, is just a name match. If you are pinged by this, flagged by this, and have to vote by affidavit, it is a good idea to have a birth certificate or a passport or a marriage license to show that name change and documentary proof of citizenship. If someone is inactive and shows up to vote, they will still be able to cast an affidavit ballot. The issue with the affidavit ballot is if you are on the inactive list because you have been pinged by this SHIELD Act, you have to bring documentary proof of citizenship within those 5 days. There are other reasons why people would have to vote by affidavit, and there are other reasons why people are inactive. And so there are several other possibilities, like you have moved, uh, like you are on an inactive list because you didn't vote in the last two elections. There are several reasons why people might be on an inactive list or have to vote by affidavit ballot. And so not all of those people will have to provide documentary proof of citizenship. But to vote on election day, you only need ID that matches the name that is on the voter roll. And they are only doing a name check at that point. They are not checking for anything else like an address match. Okay, well, thank you so much, Miss Jackie, for joining us. This truly was an invaluable conversation. It is very rare to be able to get to talk to an election commissioner like this and speak to one so frankly and really understand your process, your motivation, what you are doing to try and protect our elections, protect our voters. We really appreciate you and the work that you do. Um, for those of us who joined us on this call, thank you so much for joining us. This is Where Justice Meets Action. It's a quarterly program that we put on at the Mississippi Center for Justice to talk to you about issues that we are working on, that we want community to know about and stay engaged in. If you all do want to support the work that we do, feel free to visit our website, scan this QR code to donate. Any amount is great. You know, we are a nonprofit public interest law firm, and so donations and grant funding is where our money comes from to pay for our staff and our work. We really appreciate how engaged you all were in the chat, how engaged you all were in this topic. We will continue to put out resources on voting, how to vote. Please go ahead and check our website already. We have some guides up, but we will continue to update our website on the SHIELD Act and how it'll impact voters as we progress. And then with that, I will turn it back to Elijah to talk to you about some events that we have coming up, and that we would love for you to join us if you are able.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing conversation. I hope you guys learned something and able to take something back to your community. But before we close out, we have a few announcements for you guys. We have the Mississippi on the Potomac. Tickets are available now, and it's happening in Washington, D.C. And then we have, just mark your calendars for the Social Justice Empowerment Experience, which is October 29th through November 1st in 2026. And finally, the Great Mississippi Road Trip. Tickets are now available and spots are limited for it, so make sure you secure your spot to join us on the road trip. To learn more and stay updated on the upcoming events, visit our website. We encourage you to stay connected and get involved and continue to take a stand with the Mississippi Center for Justice. Thank you all so much for joining.